The massive auction hall stretched out like a metal cavern, filled with the strangest sounds anyone could imagine. Alien buyers chittered, clicked, and made noises that would give most humans nightmares. The air smelled like ozone and something that reminded you of burnt rubber mixed with flowers. This wasn't your typical livestock auction back on Earth. Cages lined the walls, each one holding creatures that seemed pulled straight from science fiction movies. There were lizards the size of small buildings, their scales glinting like armor under the harsh lights. Their handlers, tall blue aliens with too many arms, kept injecting them with glowing substances that made the beasts roar with artificial rage. Price tags floated holographically above each cage, showing numbers that could buy entire planets. In one corner, something that looked like a cross between a wolf and a jellyfish pulsed with psychic energy. Every few seconds, waves of emotion would wash over nearby buyers, making them either terrified or incredibly angry. The creature's eyes glowed purple, and when it looked at you, you could swear it was reading your thoughts. The bidding for that one had already hit 8 million credits. But tucked away in the very back, almost hidden behind a support beam, sat a much smaller cage. Inside was a creature that looked remarkably like a horse from old Earth, except this one had seen better days. Much better days. Its coat, which might have once been a beautiful chestnut brown, now looked dull and patchy. Scars crisscrossed its flanks, telling stories of battles that hadn't gone well. The creature's nameplate read Combat Unit XK-7742, but that cold designation couldn't hide what everyone could see. This was a broken animal. Its head hung low, and when it moved there was a slight limp in its back left leg. Every few minutes it would shiver, not from cold but from something deeper. Something that had gotten into its bones and wouldn't leave. Lot 247, Combat Unit XK-7742, announced the auctioneer, a slug-like alien whose voice came through translators that made everything sound bored. Previously owned by the Hegemony 5th Cavalry Division. Bioenhancement compatibility rating, minimal. Current stimulant dependency, severe withdrawal. Psychological evaluation, combat ineffective due to spirit deterioration. The words hit the auction floor like stones dropped in still water. Conversation stopped. A few aliens turned to look at the cage, then quickly turned away again. One buyer, an insect-like creature covered in what looked like golden armor, actually laughed. The sound was like breaking glass. 50 credits to start, the auctioneer continued, but his enthusiasm had dropped even lower. In a room where creatures were selling for millions, 50 credits was like offering pocket change for a spaceship. Nobody moved. The silence stretched on until it became uncomfortable. Even the other war beasts seemed to sense the awkwardness and quieted down. XK-7742 lifted its head slightly, as if it understood what was happening. For just a moment, its eyes met those of the people in the auction hall. They were brown eyes, deep and intelligent, but filled with a sadness that seemed to go on forever. Come on people, the auctioneer tried again. This unit saw action in 3 major campaigns. Sure, it needs some work, but the base genetics are solid. 40 credits? 30? An alien that looked like a walking tree shook its branches in what might have been laughter. That thing couldn't win a fight against a sick earth chicken, it said in a voice like wind through leaves. Look at it. It's pathetic. The hegemony should pay us to take it away. Other buyers nodded in agreement. They'd seen broken war beasts before. Once a combat animal lost its fighting spirit, there was no getting it back. The alien military had proven this with thousands of creatures over the centuries. You pumped them full of aggression drugs, you controlled them with pain and fear, and when they broke, you threw them away and got new ones. It was simple, efficient, and profitable. The auctioneer was about to move on to the next lot when a small voice from the back called out, "I'll take it." Every head in the auction hall turned. Standing near the entrance was a human girl who couldn't have been more than 17 years old. She had dirt under her fingernails and wore the kind of practical clothes you'd see on any farming colony. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she clutched a small credit chip in her hand like it contained her life savings. Which, as it turned out, it pretty much did. The alien buyers stared at her like she'd just declared herself the new galactic emperor. Humans weren't uncommon at military auctions, but they usually came with corporate backing or government contracts. This girl looked like she'd wandered in from feeding chickens. "Did that human just bid on the broken horse?" whispered one buyer to another. "Humans," sighed a third. "They have this weird thing about rescuing lost causes. No business sense at all." The auctioneer seemed as surprised as everyone else, but business was business. Going once for 50 credits to the human bidder. Going twice. He paused, looking around the room hopefully. Sold to the young lady in the back. As Katie walked forward to complete the purchase, she could hear the comments following her. Waste of money. Humans and their emotions. She'll learn. But she didn't care. When she'd looked into XK7742's eyes, she'd seen something the others had missed. Behind all that sadness and pain, there was still a spark. Still something worth saving. The transaction was quick and impersonal. Credits changed hands, ownership documents were transferred, and suddenly Katie owned her very own war beast. As the cage was loaded onto a transport, she could see XK7742 watching her through the bars. For the first time since she'd arrived, the creature's ears were pointed forward instead of back. You're going home, Katie whispered to it as the transport sealed up, and we're going to figure out who you really are. The transport ship hummed through space for 3 days before reaching New Haven, Katie's family colony on the outer rim. During the journey, she spent every spare moment sitting near XK7742's transport cage, talking softly and trying to ignore the creature's obvious fear. Every time she moved too quickly, he would flinch and press himself against the far wall of the cage. His breathing would get shallow and fast, like he was expecting something terrible to happen. When they finally landed at the family ranch, Katie's parents were waiting at the landing pad. Her father took one look at the creature being unloaded and shook his head so hard she thought it might fall off. Katie, what in the galaxy were you thinking? Her mother asked, hands on her hips in that way that meant serious trouble was coming. We sent you to the agricultural supply auction to buy farming equipment, not some broken-down war horse. His name is XK7742, Katie said, then immediately felt silly. That wasn't really a name at all. Actually, I'm going to call him Thunder. And he's not broken, he's just hurt. Her father walked around the transport cage, examining Thunder from every angle. Honey, look at this thing. It's limping, it's underweight, and it keeps shaking. The military threw it away for good reasons. We can't afford to feed something that can't work. Katie understood their concern. The ranch barely made enough to keep the family going, and now she'd spent their equipment money on what looked like the galaxy's most expensive pet. But when she looked at Thunder, she saw something different than what everyone else was seeing. While her parents continued discussing what to do, Katie opened the transport cage. Thunder immediately backed away from the opening, pressing himself into the corner like he thought she might hit him. She sat down cross-legged just outside the cage and waited. I'm not going to hurt you, she said quietly. I know everyone else has, but I won't. I promise. Thunder's ears twitched at her voice. It was the first time she'd seen him react to anything without fear. Slowly, carefully, she reached into her pocket and pulled out an apple she'd saved from lunch. She placed it just inside the cage opening and backed away. Thunder stared at the apple for a long time. In the alien military, food always came with expectations. You ate, then you fought. You ate, then you endured training that felt like torture. Food meant pain was coming next. But Katie just sat there, not demanding anything, not holding any weapons or control devices. Finally, hunger won out. Thunder stretched his neck forward and quickly grabbed the apple, then retreated to his corner to eat it. It was the first food he'd tasted in weeks that wasn't mixed with combat stimulants or behavioral modification drugs. It actually tasted good. There you go, Katie said softly. Just an apple. No strings attached. Over the next few days, Katie established a routine that confused everyone, including Thunder. Every morning, she would bring food and water to his temporary enclosure, then sit nearby and talk. She didn't try to touch him or put equipment on him. She just talked about ordinary things, what the weather was like, what her family was planning for the crops, stories about growing up on the colony. Thunder had never experienced anything like this. In military training, humans and aliens only spoke to give commands or threats. Attack that target. Run faster. Stop bleeding or we'll make it worse. But Katie's voice was different. It was gentle, almost musical. Sometimes she would laugh at her own stories, and the sound made something warm stir in Thunder's chest that he didn't recognize. By the end of the first week, Thunder was eating from Katie's hand. By the second week, he was allowing her to touch his neck and shoulders. Each small victory felt huge to both of them. Katie had never trained any kind of animal before, but she was learning that patience worked better than force. The breakthrough came during Thunder's third week on the ranch. Katie was sitting in the enclosure, just talking as usual, when Thunder slowly walked over and lowered his head until it was resting against her shoulder. He was still trembling, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from the overwhelming relief of finally feeling safe. Oh, Katie whispered, barely daring to breathe. It's okay, boy. You're home now. That's when she noticed something incredible. Thunder's trembling was stopping. His breathing was becoming deeper and more regular. And for the first time since she'd met him, his eyes weren't constantly scanning for threats. He was actually relaxing. Katie started spending entire afternoons in the enclosure, sometimes reading books aloud, sometimes just sitting quietly. Thunder began following her around like a giant, scarred puppy. When she laughed, his ears would perk up. When she was sad about something, he would gently nudge her with his nose. Her parents watched this transformation with growing amazement. The broken, terrified creature from the auction was slowly disappearing, replaced by something that looked more like the magnificent war horse he was supposed to be. His coat was getting shinier, his posture straighter, and that constant look of panic was fading from his eyes. "I don't understand it," her father admitted one evening. "The military had that animal for years and never got results like this. What are you doing that they didn't?" Katie thought about it for a moment. "I think they were trying to break him to control him. But he was already broken when I got him. So instead, I'm trying to help him put himself back together." It was a simple answer, but it explained everything. Thunder hadn't needed more discipline or stronger drugs or better technology. He'd needed someone to show him that not all relationships were based on fear and pain. Some could be built on trust and kindness instead. As the 4th week ended, Katie made a decision that would change both their lives forever. She opened the enclosure gate and left it open. "You can leave any time you want," she told Thunder. "But I hope you'll stay." Thunder looked at the open gate for a long time. Then he looked at Katie. Then he walked over and gently knocked the gate closed with his nose. He was home. The morning Katie first let Thunder run free was one of those perfect days where everything felt possible. The sun was painting the grasslands gold, and a gentle breeze carried the smell of wildflowers across the ranch. Thunder had been with them for almost 2 months now, and while he was clearly healthier and happier, Katie couldn't shake the feeling that he was still holding something back. "Come on, boy," she said, opening the pasture gate wide. "Let's see what you can really do." Thunder stepped through cautiously, like he couldn't quite believe he was being given complete freedom. For the first few minutes he just stood there looking around at the endless open space. In military training he'd only been allowed to run on command, in specific directions, for measured distances. The idea of running just for the joy of it was completely foreign to him. Katie climbed onto the fence and sat watching. "Go ahead," she called. "Nobody's timing you. Nobody's watching except me. Just run if you want to." Something in her voice must have reached him, because Thunder suddenly lifted his head high, nostrils flaring as he caught all the scents of freedom on the wind. Then without warning he took off. What happened next took Katie's breath away. Thunder didn't just run, he flew. His hooves barely seemed to touch the ground as he streaked across the pasture, moving faster than anything she'd ever seen. Dust clouds kicked up behind him, and the thundering of his hooves echoed across the valley like drumbeats. But it wasn't just his speed that amazed her. It was the pure joy in every movement. Thunder was running in great swooping circles, sometimes leaping obstacles that weren't even there, sometimes sliding to dramatic stops just to wheel around and run the other direction. His tail streamed behind him like a banner, and she could swear he was smiling. Katie's father came running from the barn, probably thinking something was wrong based on all the noise. He stopped dead when he saw Thunder racing across the landscape. "Holy stars," he whispered. "How fast is that thing moving?" Katie had pulled out her tablet and was trying to get readings. "The scanner says he's hitting almost 80 kilometers per hour. Dad, that's faster than our hover truck." They watched in stunned silence as Thunder continued his celebration of freedom. After nearly an hour of nonstop running, he finally trotted back to where Katie was sitting, barely breathing hard. His eyes were bright and alert, and his whole body seemed to radiate energy and confidence. "Where did that come from?" Katie asked, running her hands along his neck. His muscles felt different now, harder, more defined. Like the running had awakened something that had been sleeping deep inside him. Over the following days, Katie began to notice other changes. Thunder's senses seemed sharper than before. He would alert to visitors long before they came into view, his ears swiveling to catch sounds that human ears couldn't detect. When Katie's younger brother tried to sneak up on them during one of their rides, Thunder knew he was there and gently sidestepped to avoid the boy before he even jumped out. "It's like he's got radar," her brother complained. "I was being super quiet." Katie was starting to understand that Thunder had capabilities the military had never discovered. Their training methods had been so focused on breaking his will and forcing compliance that they'd never given him a chance to show what he could naturally do. It was like trying to train a bird by keeping it locked in a cage. You'd never discover it could fly. The real test came when Katie started riding him across the colony's more challenging terrain. Thunder seemed to instinctively know the safest paths through rocky areas, could spot unstable ground before it became dangerous, and could navigate in complete darkness using senses Katie didn't even understand. On one memorable evening ride, he suddenly stopped and refused to go forward, no matter how much she encouraged him. When they investigated the next morning, they found a deep sinkhole hidden by thin brush, right where Thunder had refused to step. "He saved my life," Katie told her parents that night. "He knew that hole was there somehow." Her mother shook her head in amazement. The military reports said he was combat ineffective. How could they have been so wrong? Katie thought about it. Maybe they were testing for the wrong things. They wanted a weapon they could control. But Thunder isn't meant to be controlled, he's meant to be trusted. The awakening wasn't just physical though. Thunder's personality was emerging too, and it was nothing like what Katie had expected from a war horse. He was playful, often stealing tools from her father's workbench and hiding them around the ranch like some kind of game. He was protective, positioning himself between Katie and anything he perceived as a potential threat. And he was incredibly intelligent, seeming to understand not just commands but actual conversations. One afternoon, while Katie was telling her mother about plans to expand their crop fields, Thunder wandered over to listen. When she mentioned needing to clear rocks from the new area, Thunder actually walked over to the field and started nudging the largest rocks with his nose, as if to say, "These ones." "Did he just volunteer to help with farm work?" her mother asked, staring. "I think he did," Katie replied, equally amazed. But the most remarkable change was in Thunder's confidence. The broken, fearful creature from the auction was completely gone. In his place was a magnificent being who carried himself with natural dignity and seemed to radiate calm strength. When other colonists visited the ranch, they would stop and stare, unable to believe this was the same animal Katie had brought home. "What did you do to transform him?" asked Mrs. Henderson from the neighboring farm. Katie thought about all the complicated training manuals she'd seen, all the high-tech equipment the military used, all the drugs and control devices that were supposed to unlock a war beast's potential. "I just let him be himself," she said simply. It was the truth, but it was also a revolution. For centuries, the galaxy had believed that strength came from breaking spirits and imposing control. Katie and Thunder were proving that the opposite was true. Real strength came from freedom, trust, and the chance to discover what you were truly capable of when nobody was trying to force you into a box. As Thunder grazed peacefully in the evening light, muscles rippling under his glossy coat, Katie had no idea that their quiet revolution was about to face its biggest test. Change was coming to their peaceful world, and soon everyone would see what Thunder was really made of. The message arrived on a Tuesday morning while Katie was brushing Thunder in the barn. Her father's tablet chimed with an incoming transmission marked, "Galactic Military Command Priority 1. That kind of message usually meant trouble, and this one was no exception. "Katie, you need to see this," her father called, his voice tight with worry. The holographic display showed a massive alien in ceremonial military armor. General Korax of the hegemony looked like he could crush small planets with his bare hands. His 4 eyes glowed with barely contained anger, and when he spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Citizens of New Haven Colony," he began, "it has come to my attention that one of our former military assets has been misrepresented in your primitive media networks. Combat Unit XK-7742, which was properly decommissioned due to combat ineffectiveness, is now being portrayed as some kind of miracle transformation." Katie's stomach dropped. Someone had recorded Thunder's incredible runs and shared them on the Colonial Network. The videos had spread further than she'd ever imagined, reaching even military command centers in the core worlds. "These claims are obviously fabricated propaganda designed to make human methods appear superior to proven hegemony training protocols," Korax continued. "To settle this matter definitively, I am issuing a formal challenge. Combat Unit XK-7742 will face 3 of our finest active war beasts in a series of combat trials. When your animal fails, as it certainly will, these ridiculous claims will be put to rest permanently." The transmission ended with coordinates and a date, just 2 weeks away. Katie sank onto a hay bale, feeling like the air had been knocked out of her lungs. Thunder, sensing her distress, nuzzled her shoulder gently. "We don't have to do this," her mother said firmly. "We can ignore the challenge. What are they going to do, invade our little colony over a horse?" But Katie's father was already reading the legal documents that had followed the transmission. His face was grim. "Actually, they can. The challenge is issued under galactic combat protocols. If we refuse, they can reclaim Thunder as stolen military property and fine us for false advertising." "That's not fair," Katie's brother protested. Thunder chose to stay here. We didn't steal him. Fair doesn't matter when you're dealing with military bureaucracy, their father replied. The question is, what do we do? Katie stood up slowly, running her hands along Thunder's neck. She could feel his muscles stronger now than they'd ever been. She could see the intelligence in his eyes, the confidence that had grown over months of trust and freedom. But was it enough to face military-trained war beasts designed for one purpose, winning fights? We accept, she said quietly. Katie, no, her mother stepped forward. You don't understand what those military creatures are like. They're pumped full of combat drugs, trained to kill, enhanced with technology. Thunder is wonderful, but he's not a weapon. Maybe that's exactly why we need to do this, Katie replied. Everyone thinks strength comes from drugs and fear and control. But what if they're wrong? What if Thunder's way is actually better? The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Katie had never trained for combat, and neither had Thunder. She didn't even know where to start. But as she watched Thunder during their daily runs, she began to notice things she'd missed before. The way he could change direction instantly without losing speed. How he seemed to predict what she was thinking before she even gave a signal. The calm way he handled unexpected situations. News of the challenge spread across the colony and beyond. People began arriving from other worlds to witness what many were calling the test of human methods versus military science. Most of them expected to see Katie and Thunder humiliated within minutes. On the morning of the challenge, Katie woke up with her stomach full of butterflies. Thunder seemed unusually calm, almost serene as she prepared his equipment. Instead of heavy military armor and control devices, Katie used the simple riding gear they'd always used, designed for communication and cooperation rather than domination. The arena had been constructed in the colony's main field, with viewing stands packed with spectators. Alien military observers occupied the premium sections, their various species creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Many were taking bets on how quickly Thunder would be defeated. General Korax arrived with great fanfare, bringing 3 of the hegemony's most feared war beasts. The first was a massive creature called Destroyer Prime, covered in bioarmor and cybernetic enhancements. Neural control implants flickered at the base of its skull, and its eyes glowed with artificial aggression. The second beast, designated Hunter 7, looked like a cross between a wolf and a machine, with retractable claws and built-in weapon systems. The third, Battle Unit Alpha, was so pumped full of combat stimulants that it could barely stand still, muscles twitching with barely controlled violence. Impressive, aren't they? Korax asked Katie as she led Thunder into the arena. Each represents the pinnacle of military beast enhancement. Destroyer Prime has never lost a combat trial. Hunter 7 has eliminated 47 enemy targets in actual warfare. Battle Unit Alpha can maintain combat effectiveness for 72 hours straight. Katie looked at the 3 creatures and felt a moment of pure terror. They were everything Thunder wasn't: bigger, more aggressive, loaded with technology and chemical enhancements. But then she noticed something the general probably hadn't. All 3 beasts looked miserable. Their handlers controlled them with shock prods and chemical injectors. Their eyes showed no joy, no personality, just the hollow stare of creatures that had been broken and rebuilt as living weapons. They're very impressive, Katie agreed. But can they think for themselves? Korax laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Think? They don't need to think. They follow orders perfectly. That's what makes them superior. The first trial was announced, a simple race around the arena. Katie climbed onto Thunder's back, feeling his steady heartbeat beneath her. No saddle designed for war, no control systems, no chemical enhancers, just trust between 2 friends who had learned to move as one. You ready, boy? She whispered. Thunder's ears swiveled back to catch her words, then forward again as he focused on the course ahead. For just a moment, Katie felt like they were back home, just enjoying a morning run through the grasslands. Then the starting signal sounded and everything changed. The starting signal echoed across the arena like a gunshot. Destroyer Prime launched forward with mechanical precision, its cybernetic legs pumping in perfect rhythm. Hunter 7 bounded ahead with predatory grace, while Battle Unit Alpha charged forward in a drug-fueled frenzy, foam flying from its mouth. Thunder started differently. Instead of exploding into motion, he gathered himself for just a heartbeat, like he was listening to something only he could hear. Then he moved, and Katie felt like she was riding lightning itself. Within seconds, Thunder had caught up to the enhanced war beasts. But something strange was happening. While the military creatures were already showing signs of strain, Thunder seemed to be getting stronger. His breathing was steady and deep, his movements flowing like water. Katie could feel his joy in the simple act of running, and that joy was translating into speed that defied every scanner in the arena. "Impossible," General Korax muttered, watching his instruments. "The creature shows no chemical enhancement, no cybernetic assistance. How is it maintaining that pace?" By the halfway point, Thunder had pulled ahead of all three military beasts. Destroyer Prime's cybernetics were overheating, causing it to stumble. Hunter 7 was breathing hard, its artificial enhancements consuming energy faster than its body could supply. Battle Unit Alpha was worst of all. The combat drugs that had given it explosive initial speed were now causing muscle tremors and coordination problems. Thunder crossed the finish line a full 30 seconds ahead of his nearest competitor, barely breathing hard. The crowd fell silent, unable to process what they'd just witnessed. "Beginner's luck," Korax announced, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. "The second trial will show the true difference between proper military training and amateur human methods." The second trial was combat simulation, navigating an obstacle course while avoiding automated defense systems. This was where military training was supposed to shine. The three enhanced beasts had drilled these scenarios thousands of times. Destroyer Prime went first, moving through the course with programmed efficiency. Its armor deflected most of the simulated attacks, and its cybernetic targeting systems helped it avoid the rest. It completed the course in 8 minutes with minor damage. Hunter 7 was next, using its predatory instincts and built-in weapons to handle threats with lethal precision. Its time was slightly better at 7.5 minutes, though it took several hits from defense systems it couldn't predict. Battle Unit Alpha charged through with pure aggression, smashing obstacles instead of avoiding them. Its time was terrible, but it had simply bulldozed through everything in its path. Then it was Thunder's turn. Katie had never trained for anything like this, but as they approached the starting line, she felt Thunder's calm confidence. He wasn't looking at the obstacles as enemies to fight or barriers to smash through. He was reading the course like a puzzle to solve. What happened next amazed everyone, including Katie. Thunder seemed to dance through the obstacle course. Where the military beasts had used force, he used intelligence. Where they had relied on armor and weapons, he relied on awareness and agility. He anticipated every defense system activation, flowing around attacks like smoke around stones. When automated turrets tracked his movement, Thunder would suddenly change direction in ways that seemed to defy physics. When barriers rose to block his path, he would find gaps that the other beasts had missed entirely. Katie barely had to guide him. Thunder was reading the course faster than her human mind could process the information. He finished in 4 minutes and 12 seconds, completely untouched by any defense system. The crowd erupted. Even some of the alien military observers were on their feet, chittering and clicking in what sounded like amazement. General Korax's face had gone through several color changes, none of them healthy. "Technical malfunction," he declared. "The defense systems must have been calibrated incorrectly. We demand a retest." But the arena technicians, who included several non-hegemony species, had been monitoring everything. "All systems functioned perfectly, General," announced the chief technician, a crystalline being whose species was known for absolute honesty. The creature simply avoided every attack through superior awareness and reflexes. The third and final trial was announced. Free combat against all three military beasts simultaneously. Katie's heart sank. Racing and obstacle courses were one thing, but actual fighting? Thunder had never hurt anything in his life. How could he face three creatures designed to be living weapons? "Katie," her father called from the sidelines, "you can forfeit this one. You've already proven your point." But as Katie looked down at Thunder, she saw something in his eyes that surprised her. Not fear or aggression, but a kind of gentle determination. He understood what was at stake here, not just their own future, but the future of every broken creature in every military stable across the galaxy. "We'll do it," Katie announced. The three enhanced war beasts entered the combat arena from different sides, surrounding Thunder in the center. Their handlers activated final combat protocols, flooding their systems with the most powerful aggression drugs available. The beast's eyes went completely wild, and they began making sounds that would haunt nightmares. Thunder stood perfectly still in the center, Katie on his back, both of them radiating an almost supernatural calm. The attack came from all sides at once. Destroyer Prime charged with its enhanced strength, Hunter 7 leaped with extended claws, and Battle Unit Alpha simply tried to trample everything in its path. It should have been over in seconds. Instead, Thunder moved like he was performing a carefully choreographed dance. He sidestepped Destroyer Prime's charge, causing the heavy beast to crash into Hunter 7. As Battle Unit Alpha bore down on them, Thunder spun and used the confused creature's own momentum to send it tumbling into the arena wall. For the next 10 minutes, Thunder never attacked anyone. He simply avoided every assault with such perfect timing that the three military beasts ended up fighting each other more than him. Their drug-enhanced aggression, combined with their handler's loss of control, turned them into their own worst enemies. Finally, all three enhanced creatures collapsed from exhaustion and system overload. Thunder stood in the center of the arena, completely unharmed, still radiating that same peaceful confidence. The silence that followed was deafening. Then slowly the crowd began to applaud. Not just the human colonists but aliens from dozens of species, including some of the military observers themselves. General Korax stood frozen, unable to process what he'd witnessed. His most advanced war beasts, representing centuries of military science and enhancement technology, had been defeated by what appeared to be nothing more than natural ability guided by trust and understanding. Katie dismounted and walked to the center of the arena. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly to every corner of the packed stands. Thunder was never broken, she said. Your training methods broke his spirit, but they never touched what made him special. When you try to control someone through fear and pain, you destroy the very thing that makes them powerful. Thunder didn't win today because he's stronger or faster or more violent than your creatures. He won because he's free to be himself. She paused, looking directly at General Korax. How many other failures are sitting in your stables right now, waiting for someone to believe in them instead of trying to break them? The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the galactic military had built their power on. In stables across the galaxy, handlers began looking at their defective creatures with new eyes. Maybe the problem wasn't with the animals. Maybe the problem was with the system. Within months, the Thunder method was being studied and implemented across dozens of worlds. Military doctrine began changing as species discovered that cooperation worked better than coercion, that trust built stronger bonds than fear, and that the most powerful weapon of all was simply allowing someone to reach their natural potential. Katie and Thunder returned to their quiet ranch, but their revolution had only just begun. They had shown the galaxy that strength didn't come from breaking spirits, but from setting them free. And in stables and training facilities across known space, broken creatures were beginning to remember what it felt like to hope. The girl who had spent 50 credits on an unwanted warhorse had accidentally started a galactic revolution. And it all began with the simple belief that everyone deserved a chance to show what they were really capable of when treated with kindness and respect.